Welcome to Creative Tien channel. Today I'm going to sew a very simple skirt. It is a beginner-friendly project and you can make it very quickly. The material you will need include fabric. You can use regular cotton or any woven fabric. If you want, you can use knit fabric, such as t-shirt material. But in general, the woven fabric, such as cotton, is easier to sew. But the process can be the same. And if you are using the knit fabric or any stretchy fabric, make sure you test it on your sewing machine first and just use zigzag stitch or any stretchy stitch you have on your sewing machine. You will need an elastic that is slightly longer than your waist. And I use 1.5 inch elastic. It can be smaller, maybe 1 inch or 3/4 of an inch. And any color will be fine. I'm using cotton fabric. I actually got this from thrift store. I really like thrift store or any secondhand store. Sometimes you can find very interesting fabric. This is a little bit thicker and I think it's good for skirt or pants because you don't need a lining. For thinner cotton fabric, you might want to make a lining with a thin fabric. And I already cut out the fabric. It's basically a rectangle. If your fabric is not large enough, you can do front and back piece separately. And I just use rectangle because we are going to gather the top with elastic. So you do not need to do any shaping. But if you want, you can curve the edge so it's wider in the bottom and narrow on the top. For the size, we want to make sure it's wide enough so it can go through your hip area and it has some type of gather. But we don't really need it too wide because it will be difficult to gather on the elastic. So a general rule is about 1.5 times your waist size. For example, if your waist is about 30 inches and 30 times 1.5 is 45. So the 45 inch will be a good width for the fabric. That's including both front and back together. And the length is really up to personal taste. Some people like it above the knee, some people like it below the knee. For my skirt, I like it around 24 inches long, and plus the seam allowance I'm going to use, so I put it about 27 inches. And it depends on your elastic because I'm going to build a channel for elastic. I have a wider elastic, 1.5 inches, so I need the channel to be a little bit bigger than that. And for the bottom hem, it's your choice to maybe 1/2 inch or 1 inch, and that's personal preference. So I already cut my fabric. It's in one piece. It looks like a square after I fold it up. Mine is about 27 inches long. After folded, it's about 25 inches wide. So the total is about 50 inches wide. You can see I have it in one piece. You can also cut front and back separately and sew it together. Another way you can cut the fabric is to do it diagonally, 45 degrees, like that. And this way it has the best drape, so it doesn't look as stiff. But this way it will take more fabric to cut the shape you want. So the first thing I'm going to do is to sew up the sides so it becomes a tube. So I have the right side facing and I'm going to sew about 3/4 of inch seam allowance and just use a straight stitch. And after that, I'm going to fold it in a little bit, fold and fold to hide the seam. Fold it 2 times and then sew a line after that. The machine I'm using is a Singer Vintage 201. If you are a beginner or you are in the market to look for a sewing machine, I highly recommend this machine. It's very reliable and very sturdy. The only thing is that it only makes a straight stitch, no zigzag. You can add attachment, but the zigzag attachment is not as easy to use. I didn't like the result from that. I just pin it and I'm going to sew a straight line. Remember to back stitch beginning and the end. That's after sewing the line. And I want to open it up, fold in half and half. Do the same on both sides. And I'm going to iron it and sew a line on top on both sides. Now I iron the seam, fold it half and half so the raw edge is inside. I'm going to sew a line near the edge on both left side and the right side. So we will have a nice finished seam. Now we finish the seam. You can see the two little lines there if you look closely. Here is the inside. And I decided to use the seam as the back side. It really depends on the pattern. You can also use it as a side seam because I like the pattern on the other side. So this will be the right side and the one with the seam will be my back side. And the next I'm going to finish the button first, the hem. I'm going to fold twice. The first time maybe 3/8 of an inch or half an inch. And the second time you can make it a little bit bigger, maybe half an inch or 1 inch. I'm going to iron first and then sew it after folded 2 times. That's after the ironing. I fold it once and then the second time. The second time is a little bit bigger to cover the raw edge. And then I'm going to sew it here from inside along this edge and just use a simple straight line and back stitch at the beginning and at the end. That will finish our hem. Now the hem is finished. You only see a little line here if you look very closely. And now the only thing left is elastic for the waist. And we are just going to create a pocket. So first we are going to fold down a little bit. It can be 3/8 of an inch or half an inch. And we are going to sew it first just to make sure it doesn't fray because this is the woven fabric. And it can fray if you are not careful. And then after that, we are going to fold again, depending on your elastic size, a little bit bigger than that. And then we are going to sew the channel. So first step, we fold a little bit and then sew it up. This is after ironing and sewing the first line. You can see it doesn't have to be perfect because it will be hidden. Now we are going to do the pocket for the elastic. So it depends on how big is your elastic. You can kind of measure it. And you want to have a little bit extra room, maybe 3/8 of an inch or just 1/8 of an inch. And then fold it, iron it, and we are going to sew a line down here. But we are not going to go all the way around. We have to leave an opening, maybe around 3 inches, so we can pull the elastic out. I always like to iron it first, maybe with some steam, so it always stay in place and you don't need to use pins. And this one is my Panasonic. It's a wireless one. I've been using it for a while. I really like it because you don't have to worry about wire being tangled. I'll put the link in the description box if you're interested. This is after ironing. I'm going to leave about 3 inches opening here and then sew a line all around, about closer to the bottom. Now we sew the line leaving the opening. The next is just to insert the elastic. And an easy way is to use a pin, some type of safety pin. Any size will be fine, but the bigger is easier. And use a safety pin as a guide to run through the whole channel. And it can be a little bit tedious. You just have to take your time. Now the elastic come out from the other side. I try to connect temporarily with the safety pin. And we want to evenly distribute the elastic. We also want to make sure it doesn't twist before we start sewing the ends together. And this is also a good time to try it on and decide how much overlap of the elastic it needs to be. And once you decided, we can just sew the elastic together. You can use straight lines or diagonal line. It really doesn't matter. And then we will sew close the opening. I sew a square line here for the overlap. If you want, you can add the more diagonal line to make it more secure. So now we can put it back to the channel, close it up, and we are just going to sew a line below that to close up the opening. I sew close the opening here. When you sew it, make sure you stretch the fabric because of the elastic below, so it's easier to sew. And one last thing I did is to sew a line here, so the elastic will stay in place. If you don't sew the line, the elastic can get twisted when it's in the washing machine or after a while. So I just sew a straight line here to secure it. And if you want, you can sew 2 lines on the sides too, but that's up to you. So we are done with the skirt. Thank you for watching today. See you next week.